Most people think respect is earned through confrontation. They believe that if someone disrespects them, they must respond immediately, raise their voice, prove their strength, or win an argument. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The people who command the most respect rarely fight for it. They create an environment where disrespect becomes expensive. The moment someone crosses a line, they feel the consequences, not through aggression, but through your presence, your silence, and your control. One of the most expensive mistakes people make in life is giving their attention to behavior that does not deserve it. What most people fail to understand is that attention is not neutral. It is a reward. Every time you react emotionally to someone's disrespect, provocation, gossip, or manipulation, you are feeding the very behavior you claim to dislike. Human beings are far more driven by reinforcement than they realize. A person who constantly interrupts, criticizes, or creates drama is often not seeking truth or resolution. They are seeking engagement. They want proof that they can enter your mind, disturb your emotions, and influence your state. The moment you become angry, defensive, or obsessed with responding, you have already handed them something valuable. This is why certain people repeat the same toxic patterns over and over again. Consciously or unconsciously, they have learned that bad behavior gets results. Watch carefully how people behave in everyday life. The loudest complainer in a group often receives the most attention. The person who creates tension suddenly becomes the center of discussion. The manipulator discovers that a single provocative comment can control someone's entire day. Most individuals never notice this hidden exchange taking place beneath the surface. They believe they are defending themselves, when in reality, they are rewarding the attack. Human nature is strange in this way. People repeat what works. If disrespect gains access to your emotions, disrespect grows stronger. The truly powerful person understands a secret that remains invisible to most. Not every battle deserves participation. Not every insult deserves recognition. Sometimes the strongest response is the one that never arrives. Silence creates uncertainty. Emotional detachment removes the reward. The person seeking your reaction is suddenly forced to face something they cannot control. You. This is where real power begins. It is not found in domination, aggression, or clever words. It is found in the ability to choose where your attention goes, and where it does not. The uncomfortable truth is that many people have been trained by their own reactions to tolerate disrespect they could have ended long ago. The moment you stop rewarding bad behavior with your attention, you expose who was seeking connection and who was seeking control. And nothing frustrates a manipulator more than realizing they no longer have access to your mind. One of the least understood truths about human behavior is that people rarely change because of advice, warnings, or lectures. They change when reality forces them to confront the consequences of their choices. Yet most people spend their lives interfering with this process. They rescue, excuse, forgive too quickly, and soften every impact. In doing so, they unknowingly become accomplices in the very behavior that frustrates them. Human beings have a remarkable ability to ignore uncomfortable truths when someone else absorbs the cost of their actions. A person who constantly arrives late learns nothing if others keep waiting. A manipulative friend sees no reason to stop if everyone continues giving them access. A disrespectful partner never feels the weight of their behavior if forgiveness arrives before accountability. This is the hidden cycle that traps so many relationships, workplaces, and families. The lesson is postponed, and the behavior survives. What makes this truth uncomfortable is that many people confuse helping with protecting. They believe kindness means preventing discomfort. But psychology operates differently. Growth is born from friction. Awareness emerges from consequences. The moment someone experiences a direct connection between their actions and their losses, something shifts inside them. The mind begins paying attention. Patterns become visible. Excuses become harder to maintain. This is why some of the most important lessons in life arrive through disappointment, rejection, isolation, or regret. These experiences reveal truths that words never could. Observe people carefully, and you will notice something fascinating. The individuals who repeatedly violate boundaries are often surrounded by people who repeatedly remove consequences. They have been trained to believe that nothing meaningful will happen when they cross the line. Over time, this creates a dangerous sense of entitlement. They begin assuming access, forgiveness, and second chances are automatic. Then one day, someone quietly steps back. Someone stops explaining, stops rescuing, stops negotiating. Suddenly the consequence arrives, and it feels shocking, not because it was unfair, but because it was delayed. True emotional strength is knowing when to stop interrupting another person's lesson. You do not need revenge. You do not need dramatic confrontations. Reality is already the greatest teacher that exists. Your role is simply to stop standing between people and the outcomes they have created for themselves. Because the moment consequences finally arrive, they often teach in a single day what years of advice could never accomplish. The deepest lesson is this: when you constantly save people from the consequences of their actions, you are not protecting them, you are protecting the version of them that refuses to change. Most people have been conditioned to believe that power comes from speaking first, defending themselves quickly, or winning arguments through forceful words. But beneath the surface of human behavior lies a far more unsettling truth. Silence often reveals what confrontation never can. The moment you react emotionally, you interrupt the natural process through which people expose themselves. You give them something to push against. You provide resistance, and resistance allows them to adjust, hide, and carefully manage the image they want you to see. But when you remain silent, something strange begins to happen. The masks start slipping. The performance becomes difficult to maintain. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with empty space. Most people feel an irresistible urge to fill silence with explanations, justifications, emotions, and unnecessary details. They reveal information they never intended to reveal, simply because no one interrupted them. Watch a person closely after they make a disrespectful comment. Most expect an immediate reaction. They expect anger, defense, or confrontation. But when none arrives, uncertainty enters the room. Suddenly, they begin talking more. They explain themselves. They backtrack. They become nervous. In many cases, they reveal the real intention behind their words. What looked like confidence was insecurity. What appeared to be strength was a need for attention. Silence forces people to sit alone with their own behavior, and many find that experience unbearable. This principle extends far beyond conflict. In business, negotiations, friendships, and relationships, the person who speaks less often learns more. While others rush to prove themselves, they observe. While others reveal their plans, emotions, and weaknesses, they collect information. Most people are so focused on being understood that they never notice what they are revealing. Their frustrations, desires, fears, and hidden motives leak through small comments, repeated complaints, and emotional reactions. The patient observer sees patterns that remain invisible to everyone else. The deeper lesson is not merely about remaining quiet, it is about controlling the impulse to react. Emotional control creates psychological distance, and distance creates clarity. The person who masters silence gains access to something rare, the truth behind appearances. They stop judging people by the stories they tell, and start understanding them through the behaviors they cannot hide. The irony is that the loudest people often know the least, while the quiet observer sees everything. Because when words stop, human nature begins speaking, and it never lies for long. One of the quietest forms of power is also one of the rarest. Having standards that never need to be explained. Most people believe respect comes from telling others what they will and will not tolerate. They make announcements, give warnings, draw lines in the sand, and deliver speeches about boundaries. Yet beneath all this talking often lies something they do not want to admit: a fear that their standards will not be taken seriously unless they are constantly defended. Human nature pays far less attention to what you say than to what you consistently enforce. This is the hidden truth most people never understand. Words create impressions, but actions create beliefs. The moment your behavior contradicts your standards, people stop listening to your words and start studying your tolerance. Watch what happens in everyday life. Someone complains about being disrespected, yet continues answering every message, accepting every excuse, and allowing the same behavior to repeat. Someone says they value honesty, but repeatedly keeps dishonest people close. Someone demands respect, but remains available to those who continually violate their boundaries. Over time, others learn a lesson, not about what this person values, but about what they are willing to accept. Human beings are experts at observing consequences. They quickly discover where the real limits are, regardless of what is being said. The powerful individual understands that standards become visible through absence, not explanation. They do not argue endlessly when crossed. They do not negotiate their self-respect. They simply change their behavior. Access becomes limited. Opportunities disappear. Distance quietly replaces proximity. There is no dramatic announcement, no emotional display, no attempt to convince anyone, and that is precisely why it works. People expect confrontation because confrontation gives them something to debate. They expect explanations because explanations create openings for persuasion. But silent action leaves no room for negotiation. What makes this uncomfortable is that many people secretly hope their boundaries will be respected without requiring difficult decisions. They want the appearance of standards without the cost of enforcing them. Yet, every standard in life demands a sacrifice. The willingness to lose someone's approval, the willingness to walk away from convenience, the willingness to be misunderstood. Without these sacrifices, standards become nothing more than preferences. The strongest people understand something most never learn. Respect is not created when others hear your boundaries. It is created when they witness your willingness to live by them. Because the moment people realize your standards do not move for anyone, they stop testing your words and start respecting your silence. One of the most dangerous habits in human relationships is paying too much attention to excuses and not enough attention to patterns. People are naturally drawn to stories. We want explanations. We want reasons. We want to believe that a disappointing action was simply a misunderstanding, a bad day, a moment of weakness, or an exception to the rule. This desire comes from a deeper emotional need, the need to preserve the image we have created of others. But human nature leaves clues that are far more reliable than words. Patterns are the language of truth. Excuses are often the language of self-preservation. The uncomfortable reality is that most people reveal exactly who they are, long before we are willing to accept it. Watch closely how people behave over time. A person who repeatedly breaks promises will always have a reason. A manipulative individual will always have an explanation. Someone who constantly disrespects boundaries will always claim they did not mean it. And if you focus only on their words, you may spend years trapped in confusion. This is because excuses appeal to emotion, while patterns appeal to observation. Excuses invite sympathy. Patterns demand honesty. Most people choose sympathy because honesty often forces difficult decisions. What makes patterns so powerful is that they operate beneath conscious control. People can manage their image for a conversation. They can carefully select their words. They can perform kindness, loyalty, or confidence when it benefits them. But maintaining a false identity over months and years is nearly impossible. Eventually, the same behaviors emerge. The same reactions appear under pressure. The same habits repeat. Human beings are creatures of repetition. Their true character is not hidden in isolated moments, but in recurring ones. The wise observer understands this and develops a different way of reading people. Instead of asking what did they say, they ask, what do they consistently do? Instead of becoming emotionally attached to explanations, they become curious about repetition. They notice who always disappears when responsibility arrives. They notice who only shows respect when they need something. They notice who repeatedly creates the same problems while presenting different excuses. Over time, these observations reveal a truth far deeper than any conversation ever could. The greatest deception is not what others do to us. It is what we do to ourselves when we ignore patterns because we prefer a comforting story. The moment you stop listening to excuses and start studying behavior, people become remarkably easy to understand. Because words tell you who someone wants to be seen as, but patterns reveal who they have already chosen to become. One of the most misunderstood sources of power is not dominance, popularity, or even intelligence. It is becoming difficult to replace. Human beings often speak about loyalty, appreciation, and respect as if they are moral choices. In reality, much of human behavior is shaped by perceived value. People naturally protect what is rare, useful, and difficult to find elsewhere. This truth is uncomfortable because it challenges the belief that good intentions alone are enough to secure respect. They are not. The world quietly rewards those who cultivate qualities that cannot be easily duplicated. The person who is always available, always accommodating, and always seeking approval often becomes taken for granted. Not because people are cruel, but because familiarity reduces perceived value. What is constantly accessible is rarely fully appreciated. Observe how people behave when they believe someone will always remain in their life. Effort begins to fade. Gratitude becomes weaker. Attention drifts elsewhere. This pattern appears in friendships, relationships, workplaces, and even families. It is not necessarily driven by malice. It is driven by human nature's tendency to overlook what seems guaranteed. The moment people assume your presence is permanent, they stop recognizing your worth. Yet something fascinating happens when access is no longer automatic. The value that was once invisible suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Absence reveals importance with a clarity that presence often cannot. The truly powerful individual understands this principle and applies it inward rather than outward. They do not attempt to make themselves scarce through games or manipulation. Instead, they focus on developing qualities that are genuinely rare. Emotional control in a world of impulsive reactions. Reliability in a world of broken promises. Discipline in a world of distractions. Depth in a world obsessed with appearances. These qualities create a kind of psychological gravity. People feel their value, even if they cannot fully explain it. They recognize that losing access would create a gap that cannot easily be filled. Most people spend years trying to be liked. They adjust their personality, suppress their standards, and chase validation, believing this will secure their place in the lives of others. Yet this strategy often produces the opposite result. The more replaceable you become, the less people invest in keeping you. Respect grows when people sense that your value comes from within, not from their approval. When you stop needing constant recognition, your presence acquires weight. When you build a life, a character, and a level of self-mastery that stands on its own, people begin treating you differently. The deepest irony is that the moment you stop fearing replacement is often the moment you become impossible to replace. Because what people miss most is never your attention, your favors, or your availability. It is the unique value they failed to appreciate while they still had it. Remember this: the strongest position in life is not forcing people to respect you. It is becoming so centered, so disciplined, and so emotionally controlled that disrespect naturally creates consequences for itself. The loudest people demand respect. The wisest people embody it. And when you master this principle, something remarkable happens. Those who once tested your boundaries begin watching their words, measuring their actions, and thinking twice before crossing you. Because they finally understand a truth most never learn. The most dangerous person in the room is not the one who fights back. It is the one who no longer needs to.